welcome everyone to another broadcast of Aging Without Wrinkles on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. And now here she is, your host. It's Harriet Tramer.
To at least some people who are revived from a near-fatal drug overdose experience near-death experiences before they return to consciousness. Peggy Robertson thinks that is the case. Peggy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Harriet.
What is a near-death experience? Everybody probably has their own understanding of that. Why don't you give us your understanding so that can guide us through the conversation?
Well, what it's not is what I see in the news a lot. They claim a celebrity had a near-death experience because they were in a car wreck or accident or something. They almost died, and that's not a near-death experience. A near-death experience, you actually have to have the experience when you're near-death. And those experiences have some common elements like being out of the body, seeing your body, seeing them doing surgery below, trying to rescue you, above the ambulance as you're going down the road, or it could be going through a tunnel. You end up in a bright white light. You may see family members, religious figures, or what people call guides, or they may not see anything so much, but they sense someone is there and someone's guiding them, telling them things, giving them understandings of things.
In other words, if somebody has a heart attack or a stroke and they're brought back, it's not necessarily a near-death experience. It's just something that could be very serious for them, but it doesn't mean they experienced any of these things you're discussing.
Right. Yeah, and without the experience, it's not a near-death experience.
I understand. How would you respond to people, and I'm sure you've heard them, who say there is nothing spiritual about NDEs? Rather, they simply represent instances where neuroreceptors are overstimulated, causing unusual perceptions.
Well, those are theories. Right, those are theories they can't prove. And they can't prove what people experience when they're outside of their body. They can't dispute when a patient comes back and tells the doctor, you were down the hall, I seen you walking, you changed into that shirt, you told the nurse this, you used your elbows to get that instrument, this was going on down the hall. They have no way of explaining how they were out of their body and saw these things.
In other words, somebody may be having surgery. They almost died during the surgery. They are brought back and they say, I heard this, I saw that. There should be no way they could know these things. Would that be a near-death experience, or you have to go through the tunnel?
That could be a near-death experience. They vary. It could be a tunnel like the movie Heaven is for Real. There was no indication anywhere that boy died during his surgery, but he came back and said he saw Jesus, he was with Jesus in heaven, and told this experience. The movie Miracles from Heaven, that little girl was dying of this stomach disorder she had, and she was playing in a tree with her sister, and she fell down inside a hollow tree and hit the bottom. And they said it was a miracle. They don't know how she survived this with hardly more than a scratch, but she was healed from that stomach illness that was killing her. And she had a beautiful experience in heaven and flowers and Jesus and, what God told her. And they come back with such wisdom, even children, because these things are ageless. On the other side, we're all able to access that wisdom and that knowledge. And that memory doesn't happen in the brain. It happens in the soul. And that's how even a baby can have a near-death experience. And, years later, they'll say, I remember being in this incubator. I remember this happening. Or I remember this as a toddler. I drowned and I could see, my parents trying to rescue me or whatever. And they happen outside of the brain. This is without the brain. This has nothing to do with neurons or chemicals.
Somebody could remember being in an incubator.
Yes. I believe you had talked to me before on the show about a man who told you like he was an incubator, and he's like, well, how could that happen? And I said, because it's not his brain. That was his soul. When you're outside of your body, you're not using your brain. You're in your soul. And when you come back, that memory can never fade, and it's regardless of our age. On the other side, I call it the land of all knowing. You are in this place, and you get this information, and when you come back, and then you wonder how you incorporate it into your life, whether you're young or whether you're old.
I know I asked you this before, but I'll ask you again because it's fascinating. You maintain that people who are blind or visually impaired come back from a near-death experience and it can describe very vividly what they saw, even though they wouldn't be seeing it in the way you or I seeing it, in the way I'm sitting and looking at my desk or my phone or my computer.
Yes, because that's not physical eyes they're using. That's not a brain they're using. Outside of the body, it is totally different. Your soul is perfect. You can move from time, through space, through galaxies, from here, then there, and you can see things, and they say colors are so much more vivid, or blades of grass seem like they were dancing, flowers feel like they were communicating. It's a whole different type of atmosphere.
If somebody has a near-death experience, would that change their whole perception of their life? If they were blind, would they come back and be able to see? Now, I know that's an extreme, but...
No, I've not heard of that. One thing that has puzzled doctors is at the time of before death, just before death, say someone's had Alzheimer's real bad or, has some disease of their brain, they couldn't communicate or anything, all of a sudden they have these moments of clarity. And, this has stumbled them. Like, how does this diseased brain, all of a sudden, they say, for example, my husband was just here. They say they're going to come get me tomorrow. An angel was just here, my sister, my mother, and they're going to come get me. Or I just seen an angel's here with me. They're going to take me home. And then, the nurses and know that these things happen, and this patient will pass soon. They have these indicators, but yet it isn't down on a form as the indicator, like high blood pressure or bleeding or something that would indicate this person is going to die. It's a behavioral or spiritual indicator.
It's on another realm, you're saying?
Yes.
My realm of sitting and talking to you. Now, to make sure I and my listeners understand, somebody who has Alzheimer's says they're coming for me tomorrow, and that proves to be true. They get some premonition. Would that be the near-death experience?
Yes, that is also considered a near-death experience because they're having an experience, whatever their illness is, they're touching death. They're at that threshold, and we can get to that threshold, close and pull back, close and pull back. And we get close enough, we may have an experience and then come back. Or, say someone drowns and they're resuscitated, or heart attack, they're resuscitated, brought back by other means.
Now let's take the other situation. Could somebody have a near-death experience and either because they don't realize what happened, they are afraid or ashamed to admit that this happened, they think people will laugh at them, it's not part of their religious belief or spiritual belief, and they don't even realize what happened or acknowledge what happened?
Right, because a lot of times, say if you're religious and this happens and it doesn't fit the Bible, this doesn't fit what you were raised to believe, and you don't want to tell the people in your church, and maybe you tried to, and they may say something incorrectly, such as, oh, that was the devil, or that was hallucination, or, don't dabble in that, or, make them feel guilty, like there's something wrong with them. Or say they might have a profession as a psychiatrist. They don't want people to think they're crazy. Or just, they don't want their family to think that they're a liar. They may just be totally confused and not even have the words to describe what just happened. They may not have heard of near-death experience and understand this has happened to millions of people.
Well, what I don't understand, but what fascinates me, you say, and you've discussed before, that a young child can have a near-death experience. How could a young child who's barely verbal and not reading even have the words to describe such a thing?
Well, they won't at the time, but it'll be a memory that they keep having and don't understand. And eventually, they will try to verbalize this memory. Or they may watch something or hear something and understand, well, is that what that was? Is that what that was called? I always wondered. And, it was like mine a near-death experience. And so they may start investigating and find out, well, maybe it was an out-of-body experience, or maybe, it was an NDE. And so, there's questions to ask yourself, and making sure that this was a correct memory. They may go back and say, was I sick when I was little? Did I drown when I was little? And verify.
I mentioned at the beginning of the show that it is your perception, your belief, that someone who has a drug overdose is brought back possibly by Narcan or however could have a near-death experience.
Yeah, I've done about 300 interviews, and about 25 of those have had a near-death experience from some type of overdose. It could have been an accidental overdose. Like this doctor I interviewed, he had a stressful week. He wanted to go relax with his friends, and they was at a bar, and he was drinking, and somebody passed him some substance, and he hit the floor, and he was dead for a time. And he was very embarrassing being a doctor for this to have happened. But when he was on the other side, he saw the child. He was a pediatrician. He saw the children that had died that week, his patients, on the other side. This man has no reason to make this stuff up. Nobody wants to look crazy, especially a doctor. And other people have had, another guy, he had a near-death experience unintentionally from overdose, but he was just using a workout supplement. And it happened to come from another country. It was way more potent than what it should have been. And him and his buddy got sick instantly. And this guy went to the bathroom, and the people at the restaurant saw the guy get sick, so he got hauled off the hospital, but they didn't know this guy was in the bathroom until somebody needed to go later, and the door was locked, and they found him in there dead. And he was in a body bag in the squad, headed to the morgue. And one of the guys in the squad just had a funny feeling, like something was telling him, checking on him. He checked on him, and he checked around, he found a pulse. And they end up going to the hospital, to the morgue. And he come back with a very long, detailed near-death experience. A lot of these overdoses are actually attempted suicides. They might be long, thought-out, planned overdoses, or it might be spur of the moment, or they were partying and maybe they were depressed and upset, or but it doesn't change anything about the near-death experience. The experience they have from an overdose is no different than the typical NDEs other people have, other reasons.
Now, what if somebody, everyone's going to have an idea of what someone who is not a moral individual, what that means. But take whatever it means to you. Would their life be changed if they have a near-death experience? Or might they just say, meh, that was a little strange, but it's nothing?
Some come back and think, wow, what was that? but they continue their drug addiction or their sex addiction or whatever path that they're on. They know they shouldn't be on, but it starts eating at them, and eventually they get the help and they get clean. Or some are changed immediately. They never touch the stuff again. Some say they have no desire for it again after their near-death experience.
But I'm not just talking about someone who has an addiction. I'm saying someone who's been fraudulent and every other thing.
There has been atheists that has had near-death experiences, and some have totally changed their life. One man become a minister. He was an atheist. He was a college professor, and he became a minister after his NDE. The guy they made the movie about called The Perfect Way, Ian McCormick, he was an atheist, and he was surfing, and he got bit by something called an invisible, and I guess like one bite of that would kill you instantly. He got bit like 10 times, and he was in the morgue with a tag on his toe in another country, and he had a near-death experience. And he came back to life, and he went and found his buddies on the beach, and they're like shocked. It's like, you were dead, you know. And he's, yes, I was. And he ministers all over the world and has for decades. And other people that were atheists, or, you know, say atheists, but maybe on the fence, and they have this experience, and they'll say, well, there was a spirit there, and it did say this, but I won't say it was God, and there was some guides, but I won't say it was heaven. And so they make of it what they will. And I kind of separate when I interview a guest. I listen for the experience, and then I separate and I listen to how they interpreted it after that experience. If they're exposed to IANS groups, conferences, or New Age materials, they're going to learn through those relationships that, and those books and things they read, that this is the source. This means there's reincarnation. This means that. Or someone else may say, that was Jesus, and this was God, and nobody can tell me different. And so they all make of it what they will. They may have similar experiences, but due to cultural or religious background or what they, you know, where they go when they try to find answers, that turns them into, you know, what belief path they go down is a different thing.
You've mentioned Jesus quite a few times. What if that isn't somebody's religious background? Would they even recognize Jesus? Would that have to be part of their near-death experience?
Some did not believe, and then they say, I saw Jesus, and I know who it was. One example is a guy, he was like in charge of the Ohio Police Officers Academy, Randy Schiffler. And he was a non-believer. He was a homicide detective. He was military, prior military, and he didn't believe anything unless he could prove it in a court. And he had COVID, and he had like 3% chance of surviving. All his organs shut down, and he had an experience. And when he come back, he was a believer. And he goes around everywhere now telling his story.
Do you think people, Americans, you can't speak for the whole world, I wouldn't think, have become more accepting of near-death experiences? Or at least willing to say, I'm not sure, but I believe you're being honest in what you felt or experienced?
Yes. I believe near-death experiences are very popular at this time. I started my podcast 2 years ago. And in 2 years, I've got almost 3 million views. And people can't get enough of it. The comments, majority, like 98% probably, are, oh, you know, this has made me feel so much better. It's just overwhelming. People are responding to these in a positive way. Now, there's some that will say, well, this doesn't fit with the Bible. This is the devil. Or some will say, well, I don't like the Jesus stuff. I don't like the religion in it. I invite every guest to come tell their story. I don't have questions ready for them. I just listen and then let the conversation go from there, because I want to know what truly happened. I don't want them to try to fit in my box or my values or beliefs. I want to hear everybody's story in all their glory.
You have done a podcast where people who have near-death experiences relate what happened to them, and how could people listen to that podcast?
YouTube, Peggy, I spell my name P-E-G-I, Peggy Robinson, NDE-TV. It's on YouTube. And there's almost 300 guests, and you just click on that and choose which ones you want to hear. Some you may like, some you might like better, and some you might not like at all. You know, there's, I call it like a buffet of, you know, it's just people that have had the experience and want to come on and tell it.
Now, how did you meet these people? You know somebody who knew somebody? How, you say you had 300. How did you get people who even knew to work on this podcast or be part of it?
I had been involved with IANS, International Association Near Death Studies. And I had a local group with them. And then COVID come, and so everybody started doing everything online. And so I started my podcast where I could still connect to near-death experiencers. So I already knew a lot of near-death experiencers from being involved in that organization on Facebook and groups, Facebook groups and things. And I had spoken at some groups and conference, and so I knew a lot of them. So that got me started. And then once people started watching the podcast, and then they may contact me and say, well, I had a near-death experience, or maybe once a month I'll sit down and just go through other people's podcasts and say, you know, look, I haven't had this person. I think I'd like to interview them. I'll send them an email or a Facebook message and ask if they'd be interested in being a guest on NDE TV.
And if someone listening to this show has had an NDE and would like to discuss it on your podcast, how can they do that?
Email ndetv@yahoo.com.
Now, how did you happen to get started studying near-death experiences? Most people were very busy in their everyday life. I'm not saying they never think about these spiritual matters, because I don't know that, but it seems you've become really involved in this. How did that happen?
I had a near-death experience when I was 25 years old in 1986, back before I ever heard of near-death experience, and I didn't know what it was. And then months later, I realized that I needed to talk about it. And I started talking about it a little. That's before I knew there's even a name for it. People never heard of it. They look at me like I'm strange, like, we know you're telling the truth, but I don't know. You know, I didn't know there was a name even to go to the library and look up anything. And then as we got the internet and more NDE books started coming out, and shows like I Survived, Beyond and Back, and some of the NDE movies, you know, you just start learning, picking up. And I started reading some of the research and listening to a lot of what the researchers are saying about near-death experiences. And I just have a hunger and a thirst to just learn more, learn all I can. Like, I can't get enough of trying to understand, how does this work? And after I had my NDE, I had a vision one day, and all of a sudden I remembered I had drowned when I was little. And so I went to my mom's house the next day, and I said, did I drown when I was little? And she said, yeah, you did. And she told me what had never been talked about. And I could tell her where her and my sister was sitting, where my brother was. I was above the pond, and I was this ghost kid just running around doing stuff. But my NDE at 25 years old was ectopic pregnancy with twins. That one was the tunnel experience and the bright white light and Jesus and God, and very different. And so, you know, I can understand and appreciate how different these NDEs are. You know, they're based individual, but they're also based on how old you were, what was going on in your life. And there is definitely, without a doubt, a master design plan for every experience we have. Everybody gets the experience they needed at the time. Like Randy, the guy that was head of the academy, in his experience, he was going up a ladder. And then they'd say, Randy, it's not for you. and he'd go back down the ladder. And then later he saw his parents, and then later he saw his mother-in-law and his brother-in-law. And then his last experience in heaven was he saw a man on a porch making flags and red, white, and blue ribbons. And the man turned to Randy and he said, "Tell Madison that her grandpa is okay." And then when he healed from his COVID and he was back home recuperating, he told his daughter, he says, "I need a haircut." He says, "Go down the drawer and get the card, get me a hair." He says, "Dad, did you see the name on his card? It's Madison." He says, "Well, get me an appointment with her." And he says, Madison, during his haircut, he says, "I got to tell you something." And he told her, and she looked at him and she said, "That's my grandpa." And she had married a doctor and just moved there. And so she contacted her mother because her mother said this isn't the first time he's contacted them. And he did sit on that white porch, just as he described, and he did make flags and those ribbons because he was very involved in supporting the veterans. And the mother said that a man that had a motorcycle accident had an NDE and had contacted her, and he said to tell her that he was okay. And so, Randy, he says, this would uphold in a court of law. He's a homicide detective. He's in charge of the academy, police academy. He said this would hold up as witnesses in the court of law. And there's just too much information to not be real.
In closing, I would like, again, for you to give the email if they would like to be on the podcast. And also, is there some way you can do that anonymously? In other words, they don't show your face, just your voice, if you prefer that, not identify you by name? Or is it essential you give that identifying information?
I need them to come on with their face and their voice. If they want to change their name and where they live, that's fine. But if they want to contact me, it's ndetv@yahoo.com.
Thank you very much. And you've given me a lot to think about, and I'm sure you've also given the listeners a lot to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Starting to think about care, but not ready to deal with home care agencies? INF Care is providing an innovative option that is easy to use and effective. INF Care offers a remote at-home concierge service as an option for home care. At the same price point of having a caregiver visit twice a week, our solution allows you to remotely connect with our staff daily, get regular video check-ins, and get help with reminders. Overall, a system that supports your independence. Available now in Arlington and Fairfax County. At $200 a month, INF Care provides the technology and the customer service. To contact us, call 571-422-5730 or connect with us at inf.care.
Downright terrified is how many people who are aging alone describe their later years. I'm Joy Laverty, author of Who Will Take Care of Me When I'm Old and The Complete Elder Care Planner. If you are one of the millions of people who are or will be never married, separated, divorced, or widowed, you need to act now. Who Will Take Care of Me When I'm Old is the book for you. You'll find advice on creating a support network, questions you don't know to ask, checklists, tips on where to live, and how to make your money last. Who Will Take Care of Me When I'm Old is available wherever books are sold, or visit my website at elderindustry.com. I'm Joy Laverty.
Hey everyone, check out the latest release from author S. Jackson, When Angels Fly, a touching, down-to-earth memoir that will change your way of viewing life forever. Beautifully written, deeply touching, and spiritually blessed through God. To pick up your copy of When Angels Fly by author S. Jackson, please visit whenangelsfly.wordpress.com. Listening to Aging Without Wrinkles on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. You can pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. Now back to your host. It's Harriet Tramer.
Sleep researcher Lee Gerdes has what he considers to be good news. He maintains that by following simple procedures, you will be able to get the rest you crave. In other words, you do not have to suffer an endless row of sleepless nights. Lee, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
What causes people to suffer from insomnia? Sleep would seem to be a natural thing.
It is a natural thing, but it's, if we were a porpoise or a dolphin, we would sleep with just one side of our brain at a time, because the other side would be on alert for, sharks and enemies. But we're humans, and humans require both sides to be harmonized. And sleep problems, most sleep problems, a very high percentage, well over 90%, happen because the two hemispheres of the brain are not harmonized, especially those areas that drive the autonomic system. And so that disharmony causes us to not be able to sleep very long, or not be able to get to sleep at night, one of the two.
Now, you said dolphins and porpoises. Are there other animals that can do the separation you mentioned, or just those?
I don't know the answer to your question, but it's something to look up. I just happen to know about those two because I had noted their brain in some previous study. But I do know about humans, and they have to have both sides harmonized. We're facing a crisis now with 32% of all adults having severe insomnia, and over 50% of adults having insomnia at least a few nights a month. But the major crisis, I think, happens when we look at high schoolers. Statistically there, from the CDC, we're looking at 77% of all kids in high school can't sleep. That's enormous.
Has insomnia become more prevalent in recent times?
Much more.
Did the pandemic have something to do with this?
Yes, but it wasn't all of it. It's grown over time. Our use of technology, our use of dealing with higher stresses in our life, those two things, most importantly, cause us to have a brain that's not necessarily harmonized, and that's just the basic kind of problem for our lack of being able to get restful sleep, which is everything. Have you ever had insomnia?
A little bit during the pandemic, but not a major problem, no.
Well, for those listeners who might have, they know it affects every aspect of your life. How you think and how sharp your thinking is, how you focus and concentrate. It affects how much energy you have. It affects your emotional system, and big time it affects your immune system. Makes you much more vulnerable to various diseases.
Would it make you more vulnerable to COVID?
Yes.
Was there a circle going on where the pandemic, because people weren't as active or felt stressed, weren't able to sleep, and their insomnia made them more vulnerable to COVID?
I don't have scientific evidence of that, but I believe it.
How would
I
you
think
respond?
when they locked us down, I think it caused huge stress that we didn't have a way to manage it.
How would you respond to people? Because there's people who think all kinds of ways. Were they talking about, were they making so much noise? Be more physically active in your sleep, or just get up and read a book. You're probably trying to sleep more than you need. There's nothing wrong with your body. It's just telling you you don't need that much sleep. How would you respond to people who are doubters in that regard?
Well, some people contend that they need a very small amount of sleep, 3 to 5 hours. I don't think that's proven scientifically. However, I don't doubt that we're all different either. I mean, I work with people and their brain patterns, that's my life for the last 22 years, and are we different? Wow. But that said, if I can get 6.5 to 7.5 hours of sleep with only getting up once or twice to use a facility, a restroom, I am so much better every day. It's unbelievable. That's my personal experience, and it has been for, we've helped 120,000 people, have restful sleep. So we've also done 3 clinical trials on it and 8 more clinical trials where we measured sleep. So we know about it to a great degree, and a high percentage, well over 90 of these people, when they could sleep, they had various aspects of their life went much better.
Again, I'm going to bring up the doubters. What would you say to people? What are you going through all of this? Just take some CBD, take this, take that. You'll sleep just fine. Why are you even discussing this?
You don't sleep fine with CBD. Your immune system still goes down. Your autonomic system's still out. It deadens you. Sleep medications can do that. And they can put you out. People use alcohol for that, or marijuana. It doesn't matter what you use. Whatever you do use, you're actually deadening yourself. It's an anesthetic for you to be able to fully engage the world, and so you kind of close your eyes, but you don't get restful sleep. To get restful sleep means that both hemispheres of your brain function highly, and they actually clean themselves. That's what REM sleep does. It allows us to have a clean brain, more capable the next day, and all of that capability you can't get with medications, no matter what they are.
In other words, if somebody takes medication, they'll fall asleep. It's not natural, so it's not benefiting them as much as might natural sleep.
Correct.
I understand you are acquainted with, or you sell technology that can even out or harmonize your brain waves. You were talking about the brain being synchronized, and help you to reduce the amount of insomnia you experience. What is this technology called? And where might someone be able to get it?
It's called Cereset. That's CE for cerebrum and reset, R-E-S-E-T. It's Cereset.com. There are about 50 offices are open now, and about 8 more opening across the United States. And you can find those at our website at Cereset.com.
How do you spell that?
C as in cat, E as in Everett, Reset, R-E-S-E-T, C-E-R-S-E-T.
And I don't have to have a doctor's prescription of some type. I can simply purchase this equipment?
No, it's not for purchase. It's for, we provide service to help the brain to, reset itself or harmonize itself. And what we do is we reflect the brain back to itself. It is non-invasive. It's natural. Nothing goes in. We just reflect the brain pattern back to itself.
And I would go to an office for this procedure?
Yes.
It's not something I would use like people use equipment for sleep apnea.
No, it's not. Once the brain is... Go ahead.
How did you happen to start studying or being concerned about insomnia? Most people say, oh yeah, I have insomnia, I take a little shot of whiskey. How did you happen to go the next step, study this? I assume you started this company. How did that all happen?
In 1992, in San Francisco, I was assaulted by 4 youth. One had a baseball bat, and from that assault, I had persisting post-concussion symptoms or mild traumatic brain injury. One of the aspects of mild traumatic brain injury is insomnia. Now, it happens in various degrees depending on where the blunt force trauma happened and how the brain was shifted, but most people have it to some degree. I had it to a really difficult degree. I didn't sleep much at all for 8 years without help, and even if I used various things, it didn't give me restful sleep. So I was at my wit's end.
And you formed Sarasat, or you?
Yeah, I was an engineer, before, and I dealt with data patterns and computer science, and so in looking at that, I took my own brain up and looked at it the same time every day in a few lobes and left and right hemispheres, and then I found when I was feeling my worst, my hemispheres were further apart. They were more and more disharmonious the worse I felt. When I felt a little bit better, they were a little bit more harmonious. So I envisioned a way to help the brain to see itself, and I reflected those patterns back to itself, not the high or the low, but in the middle, and that worked eventually, and now it's worked for 170,000 plus people.
Now, before you started Sarasat, did you have experience? You mentioned you had experience as an engineer. Did you have experience in marketing? I mean, a wonderful idea is a wonderful idea, but did you know how to market it, or you work with people who did?
Yeah, I think I didn't really know how to market it. I knew instead how blessed it was to have help. 8 years. 8 years is a long time not to have your life anymore and to struggle. So it grows on you in it's a weight, it's a heavy load after a while, and it starts to wear you down. So my rejuvenation was a compassion to help others. I had to do it.
Now, if somebody has a drug problem or an alcohol problem or a mental health circumstance, can getting more adequate sleep help them?
Adequate sleep is the basis for our health. It's the basis for our cognitive behavior. It's the basis for emotional behavior. Everything we do, think, say, and experience is affected by adequate sleep. So when they have some kind of a medication on board, there are many medications which may cause us not to sleep well. And there are certainly many drugs and alcohol that don't cause us to sleep well, even though they advertise that they do, which is kind of funny. But they don't. The fact is, it's seriously important, and you find that out soon after you start sleeping well and wonder, how did I ever make it before?
Now, if somebody, these Sarasette facilities, they're across the country. There's a good chance if I looked at your website, I could find one near me, or they're mostly on the East Coast, the West Coast. They're all over.
Yeah, they're spread out pretty well. And a lot of them, of course, on the West Coast because our home office is here and they're close to the West Coast. But we've done studies in southeastern United States, and there are offices there, and we have a few offices in the northeastern United States and some in the Midwest. We have pretty much all over, yeah.
What if, for whatever reasons, I prefer not to go that route, to come into one of the centers? Are there some simple things? Maybe my insomnia is not that prevalent, but sometimes it's annoying. Are there some simple techniques I can start using that might help me?
There are. One of those is to try to train your brain what you're going to do. You know, if, let's say you were trying to train yourself to hit a tennis ball or a golf ball or something, there's a timing involved in that. And what you can do to help your brain is go to bed at about the same time and get up at about the same time every day. So that's telling your brain that, okay, it's time for me to rest now. Secondly, what you can do is make sure your environment's good. So you want a cool but comfortable, dark environment, and you don't want to use that environment for other things. For sleeping and intimacy is all, and you keep electronics out of it, TVs out of it, laptops and telephones, keep out of that room. And so you're training your brain that it's time for us to relax now. It's time for us to gain. This is what we do now. Yep, this is what we do now, exactly. That's right.
Now, I've talked to people who have been diagnosed with sleep apnea. Could the methods you're discussing help them, or is that a totally different matter?
That can be a totally different matter, so it just depends. Some people with sleep apnea have sleep apnea actually because they are too parasympathetic dominant. Their brain, relaxes too much and their palate falls and cuts off their air. Some people have a different problem, physical problem. So there are various kinds of sleep apnea, but with any kind of sleep apnea, you're still going to get a little better sleep if you practice to train your brain a little bit to get more rest. And that's hugely important for you, for your happiness, for your well-being.
A lot of people's lives, for whatever reasons, maybe they work a shift one day, different shift the next day, it's just not easy for them to be very disciplined. I go to sleep at 9, I get up at 5, or whatever it is. is there anything that could help them to prevent insomnia or to control it, even if they can't really be that regimented?
That's an excellent question, because shift work syndrome is actually a part of it is a major problem, and I don't know if you know this, but there are many more accidents that happen the first 3 days after a shift change. So what you want to do, again, is try to train your brain that this is the time we're going to go to sleep, and now tomorrow we're going to change. And it's important to have sort of the blackout room or curtains, you know what I mean? So if you're sleeping during the day, you don't get light in. And again, that you're going to bed, you're going to do it at a specific time. And you're going to get up at a specific time, relatively speaking, within 30 minutes or so. So those are helpful things to get you through that shift work when the shift changes, and then continue it until the next time you have to do it. Unfortunately, if you do have a brain that is traumatized and disharmonious, it makes it really difficult. But that's where that's where Saraset comes in.
And do I have to go to many sessions with Saraset? One session should help me. It's an ongoing thing once a month, or it depends on the person?
Yes, it depends on the person, depends on the medications they're taking. But for most people, they do 4 sessions in the initial package, and the sessions are relatively close together, either one a day or one every third day. And then they do another session, the 5th one, a couple weeks later, called the integration session, so they can see how their brains moved. Saraset isn't a matter of simply asking the person how they're sleeping. It's a matter of showing the person their brain pattern, and they can see the disharmony, and then they can see the harmony if that's achieved. And for a high percentage of people, it is achieved.
Now, you indicate that if this harmony is achieved, not only will the sleep be more restful, but other aspects of their life will work more peacefully, more harmoniously?
Yes. So when we measured in a clinical trial Navy SEALs, we looked at how their immune systems were, did blood studies on that. They were incredibly better. We looked at how their strength was, their physical strength, and they were stronger, and they were faster, and they could focus and endure more. So everything that they did, which was hugely important for them to stay alive in the field when deployed, everything they did was dependent on that little 3-pound mass they had between their ears, and that functioned most highly when it was harmonized and when it had good rest.
Lee, thank you very much for being a guest on my show. I'm sure this is information that may benefit many people, and thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.